Well, baby, you've been on my mind. I think about you all the time. Oh, I want to see your face. That don't make me wait.
All right, welcome back to Sleeping Around the Podcast. I am Matthew Allard, and this is
Dr. Emery Morse.
not Brandon Hedgecock again. They look exactly alike,
I know.
but this is Sleeping Around the Podcast.
We get mistaken all the time. I can't even go out with him. Otherwise, people are like, I didn't even know you guys are twins.
I know, and here's something even crazier. We're back in Austin, Texas.
We are. We are.
We're back at the AC Hotel, where we shot many, many, many episodes. And one of our most favorite guests that we had on the older podcast is actually here today. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy.
You know, maybe once or twice. I think that he's done a few things in dental sleep.
A few, yes.
Just just barely moving
So
back
besides, hold on, before I say his name, Handsome Dan and I had this conversation. Hands down, probably one of the coolest guests we've had. Dan, do you agree? Absolutely. See, he's telling me absolutely. The best dressed.
I have to agree with that.
I mean, how many men, real men, do you know have more tattoos than me, love pugs, and love punk rock?
And Billy Joel.
And Billy Joel.
I mean, that's why he got me.
Well, yeah. And I will tell you right now, this is his amazing book. Now, this is what edition? I want to make sure I'm saying. This is Jason Tierney, everybody. What edition is this, sir?
First edition.
First edition?
Yes.
But I like the one in black. I love black. So it's just, this is the hard copy. If you look here, it says #1 Amazon.com bestseller. Not only an amazing friend, an amazing pioneer in dental sleep, now an author, and soon to be launching a brand new symposium called Transform Dental Sleep Symposium. I noticed that you're not getting away from that and he owns all the rights to that.
Beyond brand, baby.
And
Brand is brand.
just honored to have you again, brother. Thank you for sleeping around with Dr. Ann and Matthew.
Thank you. I think we might have to do some post-production because I'm blushing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's just the lighting in here.
I thought that was just your rosé.
Definitely. You were hanging out by the pool, got a little bit of suntan.
Thank
It's
you.
okay.
You
You're
got me.
good.
Thank you.
Yes, not a problem.
So, Jason, a lot has happened since the last episode, dude.
True story.
So I'm not that bright, but I was going back in the archives. The book hadn't even come out yet. It was about to launch.
Yep.
And so walk us through what's been going on since the last time we saw you here at the podcast.
Yeah, so the book was about to launch the last time, like any day.
Yep.
And there were a bunch of issues with layout and formatting.
Mm-hmm.
And that delayed it again and again. And then finally, I just decided to launch it on Amazon and just get it out there right before the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine meeting, Philadelphia, a few months back.
Yep.
And the book, relatively speaking, as far as dental books sell, it's sold really well. But far more important to me is I've gotten so much feedback from readers that have said, they enjoyed the book. It was really funny and it was interesting, but more so people that actually applied some of the tenets in the book to their practices and it's had a positive effect, or they've applied it, or even non-dentists, non-clinicians, just friends of mine, friends of friends that have bought a copy of the book and read it, that own restaurants, that own nightclubs, that have applied some of these principles to their business. And because they're pretty universal tenets, it's just I live in dental sleep, so I applied them to that framework Right. And so that's been incredibly rewarding.
I can tell you, so at Somnomed, where I work, we just had our national sales meeting. And not only a good friend of mine who I brought into the company, but Ramsey LeBlanc, and I told him I was going to give him a shout out on here, is probably one of your biggest fans.
I'll give him a shout out then. Shout out Ramsey.
His copy of your book is covered in notes. He quoted you in his presentation to our whole company. Ramsey's doing some amazing things in the Southeast. He's out of Louisiana. And he just thinks like you're like he says he's the coolest guy in sleep medicine is what Ramsey calls you. A couple things in the book that really touched on a sales side was you pulling the curtain back and giving the personal stories and highlighting different dentists, different opportunities. That really helped for someone even like me who's been in sales a long time go, oh my gosh, so this is how they think. this is a better way. So it actually helped tool, us manufacturers in effect. So Ramsey Blah wanted me to tell you that you're the coolest dude in sleep medicine. So
I don't know about that, but again, big shout out to Ramsey and thank you for
and he's a big
relaying
follower
it.
of yours on social media, which you're a great follow. And do you do daily journals entries or daily stuff?
Oh, the blog posts
Yeah.
that. No, I do them every Tuesday and Thursday.
Okay.
Sometimes I throw another one in if I'm feeling especially creative or something's really irking me. Yeah.
I get that feeling because that's how I generally roll with my like TikTok and social media is that I will have something that I'm like, okay, I'm responding to this person. But if something negative or really positive happens at my work,
Yeah.
I go straight there.
Yeah.
I'm like, I have to go to social media
Yeah.
because you feel like you need to share it with others
Yeah.
and wonder, am I the only person, am I going crazy? Am I the only person experiencing this? Or are there others who are experiencing the same emotion?
And what do you normally find out is
100%. People are right there with you,
Right.
and they all were silent, frustrated, angry,
Yes.
and they're going, wait a minute, no, this can be definitely a better way.
Yep.
I've had the most traction, actually, with the posts I do about health insurances
Managed care.
and their denials and how they are completely malaligned with any evidence-based medicine, how they're completely malaligned with mitigating risk for patients, and really just pushing an agenda that is separate from ours.
so a ton of your colleagues sympathize with that.
100%.
They're going through it, but you're their
Yes, Matthew.
you're their voice.
Yes.
Dan, are you with me? Malaligned? Malaligned?
Malaligned, misaligned,
Yeah.
both.
Well, you
both
know
are
what? If
used.
there's dentists listening, they definitely know about
Oh.
misalignment, malalignment, because that is something
Sorry.
that they're going to have to fix.
Y'all know. Okay. Once a jock, always a geez.
You big dummy.
Yeah, didn't take the hardest courses. You know what I'm saying?
But you know what,
Played
though?
baseball.
We definitely have a ton of athletes, I bet, who are listening because of the fact that we know sleep is so critically important in
Yes.
athletic performance. And what I've learned is that those athletes who prioritize sleep generally are the ones who are hitting it at the park in the classroom as well.
Well, one of the-
so,
yeah,
so I think it is important to also call out that not all jocks are necessarily
I just said
rocks.
I didn't know the word malaligned. No, I agree with you. I know that there's the newest research out there is just look at social media. LeBron James spends over $1 million on his health and performance. And what does he say his number one thing is?
Sleep. He sleeps 12 hours a day.
12 hours a day in one of those oxygen things. Let's get back to our guest. Do you sleep in an oxygen tank?
I don't.
No.
I don't. But I do want to touch on that for a moment.
Let's do
So
it.
a year ago, I ran the Grand Canyon rim to rim.
Yeah,
And-
I saw that you are an avid runner and you've lost over 100 pounds.
That's true. Well, about 20 of it's come back, but
But you lost it before.
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm back on the decline on the scale right now, so it's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
But I hiked the Grand Canyon again 2 months ago, and I got stuck sharing a hotel room with someone, which is something I never ever do. I mean,
Sure.
it's just I don't eat car tires. I don't share hotel rooms with
It's a
people.
JT
They're just
rule.
things I will not do.
Sure.
Well, he booked the trip. Unbeknownst to me, we shared a hotel room. I was a little uncomfortable with it, but okay, fine. And he snored all night long, loudly, nonstop,
Wow.
to where I literally didn't sleep at all. And
Oh,
I know
no.
people, I know enough about sleep to know people take a sleep test and they go, oh, I hardly even slept. And then you look at the results. Yeah, you did. You slept 7 hours. But I literally didn't sleep at all. And then we went to hike the Grand Canyon. So 17 miles. It's pretty arduous. It was 100 degrees. And about 2 hours in, once, sort of the splendor of the canyon had been less spectacular, the lack of sleep just hit me. And the rest of that hike was the most miserable experience of my life. I got sick afterward. I was sick for 4 or 5 days. It really had a negative impact on me. So while I've written about the importance of sleep, I've read the papers, I've read the books. Actually experiencing it for the first time in my life, what a negative impact it had on my life was just
The
bonkers.
first, Jason, the first time I slept with a man, in a room, and the snoring that I heard, it was I go hunting.
I
I'm a
don't
hunter.
snore.
No, well, I said slept.
You said it was the.
I said slept. I love you. But there's bunks, right? And so
Yeah.
you go, and I'm telling you, it was the first time that I truly could say I had empathy for the snoring sound. I've told many stories about my ex-wife and how my journey into sleep happened because of her in 1999. But you're right. And I tell people, I threw pillows, I yelled, I woke them up. I just went out to the truck and because I have to get some kind of sleep. I couldn't imagine doing something that rigorous the next day. I couldn't imagine. I can't even function if I don't get a certain amount of hours of sleep just at work.
Yeah.
Let alone pushing your body to that extreme.
So the guy that I was with, he doesn't listen to podcasts, so he won't hear this. But
What's his email address? I'll send him a prescription for a
yeah.
home sleep test.
Please, I want to say this in no uncertain terms. I mean,
No.
I hate this man.
Right?
I see him now when I'm walking my dog around my neighborhood, and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And it's, I hate you so much because he ruined my life for a week.
Now imagine being married to him. And I'm not being funny.
Oh, no, I understand.
And that's why I think when we talk about caregivers, we talk about usually later in life, people are caregivers. One of the terms that came to me through Colleen Lance, who's an amazing, she's at Cleveland Clinic now. She used to be down in Houston, sleep doctor. She talks about the modern day caregiver and enabler. And what are we doing? You know, so many pitch lines for sales is like, okay, does your partner snore? And this is what, Inspire has these great commercials, but the enabling that we do. So we just go to another room and we make comments like, well, then you're going to lose sex. It's going to hurt your marriage. But seriously, you're enabling, you're a caregiver to someone who is dying. So as funny as this sounds, right? You look at him like, I meant, did you tell him the next day, hey, asshole, you're not breathing. You kept me up all night. You need to take care of yourself. And for them to go, of course, you're not married to this person. I have to do it night after night after night. I couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
You would go into the other room. You would go to the couch.
Right.
Or you would kick him out.
Yeah.
So it's the modern day caregiver. It's hilarious.
Yeah, and I would just further that point in the fact that we know that these statistics are real, right?
Yes.
And it's not necessarily even a caregiver issue. It is a matter of that about 50% of marriages where there is snoring and obstructive sleep apnea do actually end up in divorce. So it is one of the leading causes for separation and divorce. And so you want to talk about just sleeping in separate bedrooms as a reason for there not being any sex or intimacy. And it's going to also cause you to have erectile dysfunction. So the same blood vessels that are supplying your heart and that we're always talking about cardiovascular disease, those are the same blood vessels that are supplying other areas of intimacy that are going to compromise. And so it isn't a matter of inconvenience or a noise that is annoying. And this has been represented historically all the way back into the 1950s. There's newspaper clippings that actually say the initial call to action, snoring isn't just a comical thing to poke fun at. It's not just a nuisance. There likely is a significant underlying, and we really do need to pay attention to it. You now fast forward, and you're correct. Having a night where you didn't have any sleep, that guy didn't get any sleep either, as much as he may have thought have. And you both probably suffered. And so many times people think about sleep problems as the inconvenience at night. I tend to like to remind people, what are all the inconveniences you're experiencing during the day because of the dysfunctional sleep? Are you having brain fog? Are you irritable? Are you fighting with others? Are you more impulsive and lacking good judgment? Or are you just miserable and not getting to enjoy the moment?
Or H, all of the above.
Yes.
I mean, because that's really what happened. I mean, cerebrally, I understood all of this, but having experienced it, took it to an entirely different level.
Yes.
And I was irritable. I cognitive deficiency. I mean, I couldn't really figure out spatially how much further I had to go.
Wow.
And here's a crazy one, and you might have some insights here. So I drank a bunch of coffee that morning before we descended into the canyon. Couple hours in, started drinking water. I know about hydration. That's the only reason I mentioned the previous canyon run, that I was able to do that without the issues. I didn't have the sleep disruptions from the night before. But this time, drank water. About halfway through, I felt nauseous, which I've never felt before. And I started to feel like I was going to throw up. I was afraid if I drank more water, I would get sick. I knew I needed to have some caloric intake, but the idea of eating, again, I thought I would get sick. So I didn't eat or drink the second half of the canyon, which, I mean, I expended that day around 6,000 calories. I took in 300.
Oh, wow.
And so anyway, I got basically a really bad cold and sore throat for several days. But because I don't know how to be sick, it happens so infrequently. I was like, I'm dying.
Well, you're also a man.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you had a man cold. I got it.
Yeah.
I'm married.
I was pretty sure I was going to croak any minute, but I made it. Here I am.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness for that.
But anyway, the idea of coffee was so repellent to me afterward that I went from drinking around really about 2 pots of coffee every single day.
Wow, that's a lot of coffee.
For 16 years.
Yeah.
Right.
To now, I mean, I haven't had a sip of coffee since then.
Oh, wow.
Nor do I want one. I mean, again, it's just repulsive to me, the very idea of it.
Sure.
So what is that about?
So first, I would just like to say that what your descriptions are of one night of sleep deprivation really is reflective of what we've seen in the literature, where we've taken young, healthy volunteers, sleep deprived them, see that it causes significant autonomic dysfunction. What does that mean? My autonomic nervous system, my automatic nervous system, the one that controls my heart rate, my breathing, all my hormone secretions, we see that goes absolutely haywire. Now you superimpose on that, you take coffee, caffeine, when we're sleep deprived, that temporarily relieves that sleepiness, because it combats our adenosine effects. So adenosine is a byproduct of our main energy producer in our brain, adenosine triphosphate. Caffeine blocks the effects of that. The main thing that wants to put us to sleep, our homeostatic sleep drive, that is mainly driven by adenosine. So that's why it causes that temporary relief. However, it also is going to further augment that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight nervous system. So now you went from, I'm already activated because I had no sleep. I now took something that's further activating me, and now I'm experiencing the crash. That few hours in is now my caffeine is dipping. Now I'm experiencing, again, that fight or flight. When you're having that fight or flight, you don't want to eat, right? You don't want to be like eating a hamburger and drinking a milkshake while you're running away from a lion, right?
Sure.
You're not going to be hungry. And so because you didn't even have anything in your stomach, that's now going to make you feel nauseous. Many times that now conditions the mindset of that experience became associated with caffeine or the coffee as the main driver as why you felt horrible. The secondary piece where you say that I became ill afterwards, it's not necessarily that the lack of sleep made you ill. The lack of sleep causes your immune system become deranged, makes you more susceptible to illness. So it's not a cause and effect like I don't sleep and now I contracted a virus. It's that lack of sleep. If I traveled with other people and I touched something that someone just had a cold and I touched my face, normally my immune system would be like, boom, no, you're not touching this guy. Now my immune system's like drinking its coffee. What's that over there? Yeah. I can't, I'm too sleepy. So for me, that's what what I hear. I have to tell you, I have a similar experience to that with salmon when I was younger, because I had salmon one time. It was a leftover. I got foodborne illness, sick as a dog, and I could not even think, look, and I used to love salmon. Thankfully now, like 15 years later.
Yeah. So I was going to give my example. I was at Texarkana playing baseball, and for $1, you could get a bacon cheeseburger with barbecue sauce. And I used to kill them all the time, but then I ended up getting food poisoning. To this day, I can eat a bacon cheeseburger, which I miss right now, but I can't. And I love barbecue, but them together, it just triggers like a Pavlovian thing in me to where it's so bad.
Yes.
Because I literally, that's probably the only time in my life, even when I used to be a big drinker, that I threw up so much that I had to go to the hospital.
Yes.
Literally had to go to the hospital and throw up so much.
It's amazing though.
So maybe that's why.
It's amazing how the subliminal mindset can condition you to future responses, right? And then when you're also in a situation where you're sleep deprived, your amygdala, your kind of emotional processing area, it's it's kind of overactive. And so it allows for the areas of our brain and our frontal cortex that usually is going to help us be less impulsive and make better judgment, et cetera, start to make these misconnections.
So that's what was happening to me in college in 2010 through 2012.
To today.
Just everything.
Till today.
Not
Today, yeah.
So this is my dream has come true. So when I first started in dental sleep in 2020, and I was able to meet Jason probably a year after that, this is what I've always wanted. I wanted to bring
two really
the
stylish
clinical-
people who love
that
sleep
too, that
together.
too. By the way, y'all are both speakers, you're authors, you're clinical, you did book. I love you both great shoes. But it's bringing
Yes.
both worlds together and having these conversations. Jason, this is what I was talking about.
And here we are.
And what I love doing in my work life, but just listening to you guys, it's so amazing. I know that in the book you talk a lot about that. Jason and I also share a passion that in the past there was AASM and AADSM, and then they used to do conferences back to back, and they were all kind of friendly, and then something happened. Something happened to where it has been these separate worlds. I find that you do an amazing job, and one of the people I look up to in the dental sleep world, that you're always open. You're always hand out to learning and working with physicians. I'm curious, you've been in this a long time, brother. I mean, you've been in this a long time.
You're telling me.
in the sleep world. Are you seeing kind of an arc now coming up to where there's more of a side-by-side and walking together with physicians and sleep dentistry in the world of sleep?
I see it more, but it's still, frankly, abysmal.
Yeah, I would agree with
there's
that.
so much work that needs to be done,
Yeah.
right? We can celebrate the small victories, but
And I
let's
do.
understand that they are just that.
Yeah. Well, I would
Small
think when you
victories.
look at, and especially in the world of sleep disordered breathing, right, there are several players in the game, right? You have your sleep physicians, who most typically are going to be pulmonologists, sometimes neurologists like myself. You then have ENT, you have dentistry. And if you look at any publication on sleep disordered breathing, I'm doubtful you're going to find many that have all three of those together. And that's the challenge, is that it's not for a lack of science per se. It's a lack of communication of good science being done. And so that is not hurting us in the field. It's hurting every single person who is listening to this podcast who wants options for how can they breathe better at night, how can they sleep better, and to your point, how can I make my husband shut up so I get a good night's sleep, or vice versa. I can't always say that it's a man. In fact, that's the other big misperception, is that this is such a man's disease. And it's true, before the age of 50, 18 to 50 years of age, it's a 2-to-1 ratio. For every 2 men, there's a woman. At the age of 50 and above, it goes to a 1-to-1. Women are just as inclined to having obstructive sleep apnea because of menopause and the lack of estrogens and progesterones that drop make our upper airway a lot more susceptible to sleep disordered breathing. And unfortunately, they get called just insomnia. And these are probably people who do great with dental devices or other options because of the fact that they're just not being offered them.
And I'm sure you and your wife and Stacy are probably seeing that in their own practice there.
Sure. I think that's probably true, yeah. So what's going to change?
So I think the reality is bringing all the key stakeholders together, right? So when you look at the landscape, people in sleep medicine, we're being trained by people who have been doing sleep medicine without associations with other fields, whether it's ENT or dentistry. Therefore, we're learning the same mistakes. We're learning that the only options are PAP therapy, surgical modifications in kids, tonsils and adenoids, in adults, potentially Inspire, UPPP, or a variety of others, mandibular advancement, et cetera. And that's the part that cracks me up, is we'll do surgical mandibular advancements, but yet we don't take the consideration as to, are there other things like dental devices that may actually open that up? So my dentist actually does sleep medicine. And so he and I have been having a lot of conversations about this recently, because they do amazing things at our dental practice. They have a beautiful 3D imaging process. I have a great publication with Emmanuel Mignot and several other researchers from a variety of different centers from our STAGES study, where we looked at 3D imaging in the ability to do predictive modeling of obstructive sleep apnea had a higher sensitivity than using something like the stop bang in terms of the results. And I think dental practices, you don't have to ask a thing. If you're doing 3D imaging, you can apply these machine learning models and be able to pull it out and then just say, yes, you're a candidate. Who can I partner with to be able to help patients get to solutions faster?
So dentists are told something entirely different. What you just shared, dentists are told that the opposite of that is true, that a dentist can't just take a 3D image and with any positive, predictive, blah, blah, determine what the airway
Well, that's
looks
probably because the paper was published in 2022. They may have not just caught up yet.
Well, no, we're talking,
I'm making a joke.
and I'm only talking almost 3 years experience. He's talking many years, and his wife is currently in a practice, and so that's the refreshing part, right? And the Keith Matheny's of the world, US ENT and amazing ENT and friend, and small victories. But I love that we're getting this together and getting it out. But keep going with that point. They are, and they're told, let us handle it.
Yeah.
This is your job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and we talked about this before we got started. I think that awareness, I talk about this too often. If you had a Venn diagram with 3 circles, in the center with physicians, patients, and dentists, and that center, that overlap would be lack of awareness.
Yes.
Physicians, well, and that's actually, I'm going to speak for dentistry here, okay? Not all dentists, of course. But most dentists, they just talk about physicians as if though that's like they're all just the same, meaning, like there isn't there aren't ENTs, pulmonologists, sleep physicians, primary care.
Sure.
It's just like, oh yeah, all physicians just put patients in a CPAP. And of course that's not true.
Sure.
But it's a generalization that has the scent of truth.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And then with dentists, so physicians don't know, what I was trying to say is physicians don't know dentists exist. But then dentists have this fallacy about physicians that like somehow all physicians are well trained in sleep.
Sure.
And
that's a fallacy.
That's an absolute fallacy.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, I think the last paper that I looked at comparing dental education on sleep to medical education on sleep showed that while both were dismal, dentists actually had like 0.2 of an hour more in all their schooling on sleep. And so physicians don't know sleep.
No.
It's not on their radar.
No, it's not.
Dentists, despite the American Dental Association and the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine both encouraging dentists to, at the very least, screen for sleep apnea, they don't do it. They have this lack of awareness. They don't know what they're looking at, what they're looking for, what they should and shouldn't do.
Sure.
And then even if they do, oftentimes that lack of awareness goes to sort of another level where it's, they don't know which devices to use for which patients. Should they, when do you use a Somnomed Avant? When do you use, the soft liner? When do you use ball clasps, et cetera? How do you bill medical insurance? And then you've got patients who, like the guy that I shared that hotel with, he has no idea that his morbid obesity and his overall antisocial behavior is probably attributable to some sleep issue.
Sure.
He has no idea that he might be able to, get off some of these medications that he's on, or lower the dosage or whatever it might be, if he just got better sleep, and that there are solutions out there.
And I think for me, one of the things that I would say is that although we're talking about sleep and that being the interface between dentistry and medicine as like a disconnect, I think that it's much, much bigger than that. The fact of the matter is that many times, because it's not kind of the same patient care pathway, right? it's viewed as like, this is the whole body, and then there's the mouth. And the mouth belongs to ENT, except we're talking about teeth. Then that's dentistry, and no one knows what to do, right? And so the reason I say that is because even without even talking about OSA, talking something about periodontal disease, right? Most recent literature is demonstrating that to be an independent risk factor for adverse cardiovascular outcomes, right? Because it's putting you in a pro-inflammatory state. That has absolutely nothing to do with OSA, although likely those are also individuals who have oromotor or
Burt
airway.
Reynolds had that. He ended up getting the disease. Blood went to.
He had a mustache. Is that what you're thinking of?
Did he must have had,
Yes,
yes,
and
periodontal
in the
disease.
80s,
Yes.
in the 80s, everybody thought he had AIDS. He had lost all the weight, but it ended up truly being that, and it stemmed from, I think, probably false teeth being put in.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a toupee. He had a toupee, but he did have a great mustache. Okay, but no, I agree with you. This is my point. That has been the goal of mine. Part of the reason the podcast started was that my relationship with Jason is how do we, and I hear you, like, when is it going to get to the point? I mean, and you have an amazing platform, and I'm very grateful. When does it get to that point? Because until you broke it down like that, it's so funny because even Keith Matheny will admit, he goes, I do surgeries. I really don't even cover, I have nothing to do with the teeth.
Sure.
I pass that off to Heath Roberts. But I believe in OSA. I know it happens with patients, but I can only do so much, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody's like that.
Yeah.
I think there is this sectioning off of the body. I love
Yes.
that. Even the brain, right?
Yeah.
So
I'll give you an example.
Please.
I'm a neurologist. I run a child neurology practice. We have 50% of our referrals are headache. One of the first things I do when I examine my patient, open their mouth, look for signs of bruxism. There's not another person. I wasn't trained that way in my neurology practice. It's that I know that exists. Why? I brux. I have temporomandibular joint dysfunction. I'll feel how they open their mouth. Many times you see the movement to the side, right?
Wow.
And the reality is if you start addressing those things, you make a huge difference. And so when you think multimodal, when you think about, I want to treat the whole person, we can't just take the teeth and put it somewhere else, right? Sure. And that's what we're doing. And it's really, you're correct, that it's not just a lack of education on sleep. It's a lack of education on the fact that we need to start thinking about these together. And so there should be more conferences, more education that is showing the cause and effect, because without that, the people who are experiencing consequence are our patients.
Yeah.
But Jason's at the forefront, right, with this book and a symposium that'll be coming up in
February 2nd and 3rd, 2024.
and it will be held in beautiful.
Scottsdale, Arizona.
It's a nice place to be in February.
That's a beautiful place.
I'm from central Pennsylvania, so
It's a beautiful place to
The
be.
average high is 73 degrees on those days.
wonderful.
I was
Heated
able
pool. Sorry.
I was able to spend a summer in Scottsdale playing baseball, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. Number one, just being in Arizona. It's been a great experience. Tell us a little bit about this symposium, because you mentioned conferences and awareness. This is brand new.
It is.
This has never been done. So this is what they say, the very first annual conference. Tell us, our audience, and tell Ann and I a little bit about what's unique versus what's already out there.
Yeah. Well, so typically conferences in dental sleep fall into one of two categories. Either they're really focused on academia and science, or they're just sales meetings for these companies masquerading as education. And what I wanted to do, in my experience, dentists can get the science from myriad journals, books. I mean, the information's out there, but it's the practical aspects of growing a dental sleep practice, of really incorporating into the practice and then growing it, is where most people struggle. I mean, most dentists, if you talk to them, they go to a course. I mean, dental sleep and many of the surveys that I've read, the dental field surveys, show that dental sleep medicine and implants are the 1 and 2 most popular areas of interest. So all these dentists go to these dental sleep meetings, these sales meetings, and then don't do much. And it's not because of a lack of interest, a lack of desire. It's because they just, so now what? So I've got this information. Now what do I do with it? So this conference is focused on practical aspects of implementation and growth And we've got, a veritable who's who of dental sleep medicine there, as well as an ENT and a sleep physician trying to, create a bridge that you alluded to earlier. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, I've hosted a dental sleep symposium years past
Yep.
that many herald as the best dental sleep medicine meeting ever, and it certainly was. And I want to take that to the next level with the Transform Dental Sleep
So the only
Symposium.
question I have is,
Can
will
you
you
speak? Yes.
Well, that was question number 2, but the first one was, will you be stage diving off of the stage, like kind of drop the mic, best conference?
It could
and
happen.
If we get,
Because then I'll be there.
if we could get the
that's what
right
it takes,
band,
that's
if we
what I'll
get the
do,
right
yeah.
band. So I love this. Again, Jason and I've had several conversations, and I disdain dental conferences, and my company knows that I disdain dental conferences. The company I currently work for created one, a summit that is clinical, but it takes on a whole different aspect. When Jason talked to me about this early on, I was so excited. I think it's really taken his book, and this is just my opinion, and this is what I hope it is, and really puts it out there. It gives everybody who truly read this book and got something out of it, it gives all of us a place to have community and share best practices, learn from the Max Kerrs of the world who do it excellent, learn from the Kent Smiths of the world who now up to 6 locations. I mean, these are people that are highly respected. Then you bring in someone that I probably can't say his name from the Northeast coming down on the doctor side and speak on how that integration happens through an ENT clinic. I'm so excited because also I know how fun you are. So it's almost like you took Sleeping Around the podcast and you're putting it in Arizona for a weekend. And by the way, I want to do a podcast from there, and you're just blowing it up in a good way, dude. And so that fires me up because I've gone to all these dental conferences, guys, in the last 3 years. I've gone to every single one of them, and I'm not going back. I didn't even go to AADSM this year.
Yeah.
And
We missed you.
Didn't
You
need to
didn't
go.
miss it, though.
And my goal has always been I love sleep dentists, but I call them physicians. And the reason I do that is to bring my sleep dentist with me and to show them. And this is why I'm excited about yours. I am so confident in yours that I already talked to Ann about it, but I'm going to talk to physicians about going. Jason, I want to bring my physicians to your conference to go, because I think that would do a world of good. Let them be the audience and go, oh, just like what I do with the summit, where I have all these amazing people in sleep, doctors, and I bring dentists in and they go, oh, because I think what happens is, and I'm not saying this is your conference, dentist on dentist listen to each other, right? But then there's territorial or there's hard feelings or whatever. And they go, okay, but I can't do that because I'm not him or her. I think when I'm bringing these physicians in to your conference, they'll go, oh my gosh, look at their passion, look at the thing. And so I'm just so excited.
I would just want to bring a point forward because one of the things that I'm known for is I speak internationally on the patient lens, right? Patient empowerment, activation, really gaining more knowledge. The majority of people who are probably watching this are probably coming more so from the patient side, right? And so one of the things that I always drive home to every conference that I speak at is that you're in the driver's seat. I'm just your guide on the side, right? Even as when I'm playing the physician role for you. And I encourage them to ask their doctors and now their dentists the hard questions. I don't want this. I've seen these other options. How would you think to encourage people who are listening, who maybe either they or their partners have snoring or breathing issues, or maybe they've been diagnosed with OSI, maybe they've been given a CPAP. How would you encourage them to navigate that? How do they find a sleep dentist? How do they get their sleep doctor and a sleep dentist to kind of play in the same sandbox? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is probably just ask their dentist what their experience with it is. And then other than that, go online and you can go to the AADSM site. There are a couple of, go to the AADSM site and you can search for dentists in your area. So you know that these are dentists that are well-trained, that are experienced, that are, just frankly stated, legit.
Sure.
You could also go to, watch this. You could also go to prosomnus.com where they have a list of amazing dentists, sonamed.com, where they have amazing list, panthera.com. So these are three of the main manufacturers on what I do with the oral device that will give you amazing list of certified sleep dentists all over the country. There's another avenue.
Sure. And I would like to take those websites, and if you're a sleep doctor who's listening to this, make it a point, Google it yourself, get your list of your sleep doctors to be able to refer to and potentially start creating your own local community. Because the reality is, if the point of this is a call to action of what can we start doing differently, what you can start doing differently is encouraging one another in your own community to be able to take better care of the patients that you're prioritizing every day.
Yeah, real quick, man. I mean, I gave a talk yesterday, and it was something you just shared speaks to that. One thing I hear from a lot of dentists is that they'll really dive in on this once Blue Cross Blue Shield reimburses properly. Once once all these sort of bureaucratic or legal or regulatory issues are favorable to them. And while I see there's a shift in that landscape, that slow move, these tectonic plates move very slowly over a long period of time with a lot of pressure. And so rather than waiting for that, look at what you can do as a practitioner in your own practice. What can I do to change the way that we do things in our practice, which then affects our community? Stop thinking globally, but start looking at this locally. And you've got agency and you've got autonomy to change what you can change. Stop waiting for all of these other things to change and then do it now.
Yeah. And sign up and register for Transform Dental Sleep in February in Scottsdale, Arizona.
What you said.
I keep mentioning our conversations, Jason. I apologize, but
you were talking a lot to him without me. I don't really like this.
Well, we've been
were
friends.
you talking behind my back?
Of course, of course. So when I find that in a local area, in my dirt, in my territory, I have found with much success that state by state is unique. In some states, an ENT clinic, a physician who can 1099 a dentist to come in and do that EO 486, that's the billing code for an oral device, and do it legally and ethically. They can scan and fit inside those offices. Now, there's some states like New York State up in the Northeast, you can rent out a location. There's answers everywhere. And I find that usually the dentists by the time they come to me, they're beat down, Jason. They're saying, well, when Blue Cross saw, that's really out of your control.
Sure.
Because until all of us get a lobbyist, the national average for our listeners who really care is about $900 reimbursement. That is nothing to a sleep dentist.
Sure.
That is nothing. And there's different managed cares that do better. I'm not here just to pick on Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Although you should, because they have very terrible
see, here she
reimbursement
goes.
strategies.
Here
if
she
you
goes.
go on my social media,
I've
you'll
seen
see many call outs specifically to Blue Cross Blue Shield. So yes, it is your call to action, Blue Cross
So
Blue
I
Shield.
do believe
Put
that
the patient back in the center.
I do believe that giving, empowering, and that's what I find that you do. Tell us also the difference. We talked about the symposium, but your book. Extremely honored to be mentioned in it, by the way. I had no idea, but this is ironic. I wanted to finish his book. I did some digging, and I knew that his father was from St. Louis. I had no idea you grew up there, but I knew your father because I read your book. But as I'm reading it, I wanted to finish the book in St. Louis. That's where we did our national sales meeting. And upon the very end, he gave a shout out to the podcast and to me. And so, brother, that was sweet. But your book is different. Your book is completely different from anything that's out there. Your number one fan, Ramsey LeBlanc, will tell you that because he's a big reader. Besides the inspiration behind it, what is truly different, and why does somebody need to get this book right now? Right now.
Yeah, it addresses the issues. I've been in this field for nearly 20 years, and a number of different capacities, and I've seen a lot of what works and what doesn't. So if you're interested in incorporating this into your practice, the book is in 3 sections. The first section basically says, don't do all of these things. It's all of the pitfalls, the challenges, the obstacles, the rip-offs that you'll encounter.
Yep.
If you're new to this, you'll read this, don't do those things. If you've been doing it for a while and you read this, you'll kind of chuckle and go, "Oh gosh, he's so right." I remember when I see myself in that.
Yeah.
The second section is really focused on communication, consultative selling. Now, a lot of clinicians hear selling and they go, I'm a doctor. I don't sell.
Everything we do
Everything
is
we
sales,
do is selling.
unfortunately. And it's not to make it that the patient is a consumer.
Right.
They are still a patient who needs care needs. But you have to market to them that you're reliable, that you're valuable, and then you have to sell an assessment and plan. I
Yes.
mean, although that has a negative connotation because
Yes.
it associates it with consumerism, it's true. You want them to buy into what you're saying
Here's
so
an
that there's a
example.
good outcome.
I throw Dennis in the car with me all the time, and I say, "You do 3 sales calls. Let me watch you do it, and then I'll do 3 sales calls." And it's funny. Now, my background is sales. I have been doing sales since 2005. So I might know a little thing or two about sales, but watching some dentists sell, it's hilarious. So you're right. So that it's not their natural, but listening to them and kind of watching them do it. And I say, okay, now watch me for 3 calls and let's work on a plan of action that works for you best. Because again, not everybody, when they hear that word sell, but also when they have to actually get out of their office, you talk about this, when you actually have to get out there and have a conversation, you're not asking them for business like you would close, right? Always be closing. It's a consultant. It's hey, let's work together on this patient. And so I see that a lot, Jason. So that's funny you say that, but I love just throwing them in the car with me.
Sure.
And
yeah,
let's
I
go
can see
make
where
some
that'd
calls.
be wildly useful.
Love
Yeah.
it. Love it.
Eye-opening for them, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, if we look at selling as really just being an exchange of your resources for mine, I mean, it needn't even be about money, right? You want your kids to empty the dishwasher, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's a sale. All of it, everything we do is selling.
Right.
And so and there are different ways to do it, right? You know, there's the selling with the negative connotations of like the smarmy used car salesperson, and I kind of tell a story about that in the book, right? And I relate it to, you know, sort of these faux pas that these salespeople commit. I relate it to how dentists or dental team members do this in their practices, right? These similar traits.
Sure.
And then give ways to overcome that. And those ways, you know, when you incorporate those into how you communicate, you as a clinician, you have better relationships with your colleagues, you have better relationships with your patients, and you have better
Absolutely.
relationships with your team members.
Sure.
Because you're selling to them too, right?
Sure.
And they're selling to you, right?
Yes.
It's bilateral. And so the second section really focuses on that, on communications. And then the third section is this business framework that, you know, it's the entire book. It is different, but it's derivative,
Sure.
right? As far as I'm concerned, the world doesn't need any more content. Everything's been said and done. What we need is ways to curate that content and make it interesting or compelling and digestible to our audiences.
Yes.
So I've got shelves and floor to ceiling bookshelves in my house. And I've read all of these books and I've taken notes on them and note cards and written marginalia and all of this jazz. But nobody else, or I shouldn't say nobody, few people I know do that stuff.
Sure.
But if I take the key concept from this book and what my key takeaway from that book,
Yes.
and I synthesize them through, you know, what I would say is my sardonic wit and humor, and put it into a book and say, here you go, doctor.
Yes.
They will read that.
Yes.
Short chapters, little quick tidbits, you know,
Sure.
bite-sized nuggets. And so the last section has this business framework that because there aren't enough acronyms in sleep, you know, with HIRDI and all that jazz, I call it Go Deep, which stands for generating a vision, outlining a path, delegating, executing, evaluating, and then pivot. And that business framework, again, derivative,
Sure.
but if you follow that, you will be successful. Why do I know that? Because the basic concepts are prevalent throughout, everything from Netflix to Apple to the top 100 dental sleep practices, right? So if you do these things, or, I like to use AA speak. If you practice these principles in all your affairs, you will be successful.
Sure.
However, if you read this book and have some chuckles, which you will, and then set it aside and don't incorporate any of its tenets, you're just going to be right back where you were.
And that's where I think that symposium
it
comes in.
happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think one of the things, as I'm listening to you kind of recap this, is that although it's called Transform Dental Sleep, clearly there's characteristics of the book that you can apply across a variety of different areas, not only different businesses, but also within regular medicine, right? Not just dental sleep medicine.
That's
And
why I want to invite
yeah,
doctors.
and some of the other pieces that you've stated remind me of other books that I've read for leadership development, right?
Yes.
So looking at something like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People
Referenced in the book.
Yep, by Stephen Covey. I'm hearing you, and I'm thinking of the circle of influence. Start with the end in mind.
Yes.
And these are all of the things that you're right. Consistently, if you take all of the fragments from all these different books and then synthesize them so that someone can off the shelf go, this is how I revolutionize my practice,
Yes.
because it's specifically curated for all the things that I'm like, is he reading my mind? Was he in my practice?
Yes. Yes.
And so I do think that that's really, really important, because that's transformative. As an administrator, very frequently I'm charged with what are going to be your KPIs, your key performing indices, what is going to be the return on investment, give me the business plan, outline all of these things. And you then also have to try to predict where are going to be the stumbling blocks. When you have the cookbook that tells you don't cook it, don't knead the dough too long,
Yep.
otherwise you're going to end up with rubbery
Yep.
dough, that helps you to be more likely to have the successful baking outcome. That's exactly what you've done, is you've created a recipe for success specifically for sleep dentistry. And I would further that to say sleep medicine. Because if we can apply these principles in sleep medicine and further reinforce the bridge between the areas, I think it's going to be very, very impactful.
Everything you just said, I agree with. Thank you. If you want to go on a book tour together, just let me know.
I think it's one of the many things that I love about you, Jason, is Jason has been to Austin recently. He actually texted me and see if I can make it. Share with our audience why you and Dr. Max Kerr were in Austin recently, my friend.
So a punk hardcore band that I've dug since my youth broke up many years ago, but they get back together every so often to play some reunion shows. They were playing in Austin. They're from New York. They played in Austin. So I thought that's a great opportunity to fly in, see the Gorilla Biscuits, hang out with Max Kerr, and then also,
This is cool.
I'm tying all this together here. Some friends of mine from St. Louis, which is where I'm from originally, they were coming to see the band, the Gorilla Biscuits. And so I had this sort of amalgamation of all the phases of Jason's life at the Gorilla Biscuits show. So I had Dr. Max Kerr and Big Ben, shout out to Ben, and his, so they were there.
Yep.
And then my friends from St. Louis that, I used to play music with and stuff, stage dive with and all that stuff. They were there. And, one of the guys that from St. Louis that came down, he has ready for this, a vegan taco restaurant that's horror movie themed and only plays death metal music,
Okay, I like that part.
blaring at like 11. And he opened it right in the beginning of COVID. And I was like, well, first of all, this is a terrible concept for a restaurant. Like, I love vegan tacos. I don't really care about horror movies or death metal, but I was like, this is a terrible concept. This is going to fail. And I was bummed for him because he was going full steam ahead.
Right.
Oh, poor Brian, I thought. Anyway, this restaurant, not only is the food fantastic, but it's called Terror Tacos. I'm going to give him a shout out.
Yeah, please
Shout
do.
out Brian at Terror Tacos.
And this is in Austin, Terra Tacos?
No, it's in St. Louis.
St. Louis, okay.
Missouri. So
So those of you in St. Louis, make sure you check out Terra Tacos. If you do, make sure you're commenting put up some pictures. Let us know.
Yes, they have very Instagrammable
Awesome.
menu.
Awesome.
But Terra Tacos. So Brian comes down, we hang out, but his restaurant. I thought this is gonna fail. This is a waste of money, waste of time. This place, booming. So front page of the New York Times food section.
Wow.
Love it.
Best vegan restaurant in St. Louis awards, all this jazz. Fantastic. So he came down, we hung out with Max Kerr and had a fantastic weekend. I didn't stage dive.
Well, you ended up going to Comedy Mothership.
We went to Comedy Mothership. We went to a fantastic
legendary.
restaurant as well. I don't remember the name.
Yeah.
But we had a blast.
Wow.
I don't know how Max felt about the Gorilla Biscuits necessarily, but
well,
it was an
listen,
experience.
before we get out of here today, and now that I set the stage, Ramsey calls them the coolest guy in sleep dentistry. We know about your background and, punk rock music and stave diet and all this cool stuff. Talk about your passion for pugs. If you guys want a great follow, he does, what did you call it? A day, every Tuesday, Thursday, you do a blog.
Yep.
A blog, or is it a vlog now or a blog? It's
Blog.
okay. A blog.
With a B.
Okay. With a B. I noticed that pugs is like the center. So explain to our audience before we get out of here. I know we talked about sleep, but I got to hear this. Because when I look at a pug,
You think of sleep apnea?
I do. I swear.
They actually are
My
very high
daughter
risk.
has a pug named Bailey. And I went, you just bought a sleep apnea dog.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. He
talk
gives
to
them
us.
dental devices.
So talk to me. Where did this come from? What's your passion with pugs?
I like dogs. Okay, I guess.
Okay.
Not really, but I love pugs. So if I'm driving down the street, this is the truth.
Okay. I
No
believe-
hyperbole. This is the truth.
All right.
If I'm driving down the street and I see somebody walking their pug, I bust a U-turn and jump out and I accost them. I mean, excuse me, man.
How many times have you had the police called on you?
I don't know. I pet
no,
the pug and then I
no.
jump in the car and burn out. real quick.
No, with pugs only, Jason. Don't
Yeah,
give
yeah,
away
yeah,
the...
yeah. No, but I
kidding.
really do. I jump out and
Let 'em
please
know.
let me pet your dog and
That's so
and
funny.
and I have 2 pugs, but 3 pug tattoos, and more pug socks than you own socks.
What's your name of your pugs?
Revel with a V like Victor,
Yeah.
and Waffles. Revel and Waffles.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
And so you just always just love pugs?
Yeah, I mean, I could make up some lore if you
No.
want, but I just see them and I.
But hold on. I don't
They
have to
make
make.
you happy.
I don't
I'm
have
pretty
to make
cold
up.
and
I don't have
callous.
to make up a lore. You have 3 tattoos. Jason.
Yeah.
Okay. And I will tell you that.
Of pugs.
Yeah. Well, no, I know you have. But to me, it's when I look at a pug, I swear that's the first thing I think of is like they have bred these dogs not to breathe.
Yeah.
This is true.
That is actually true.
Yeah.
That is actually factual.
Yeah.
That was a part of its
Actual
breeding.
factual. Yeah.
So I had to ask the question. I've never talked to you about this
Yeah.
before, obviously. So I apologize. I hope I didn't ruin our friendship. You seem upset.
Yeah, man, there's nothing I love talking about more than sleep and pugs and the Gorilla Biscuits.
Yeah, I mean, I think after this, the call to action actually is
Yeah.
for Gorilla Biscuits to come on our show so that we can further fulfill
Well,
Jason's dream.
My hope is that if I can pull this off, here's the challenge. And Kent Smith knows when I get a challenge, I come through with musicians. I'm going to get Gorilla Biscuits to your conference.
That's probably
That
not a
would
good
be-
idea. While it's much appreciated.
No, hold on. They
then
don't have
you can
to play
stage
the
dive.
conference. They don't have to play the conference. But I would love for them to be in the area for those who choose to see the type of music that Jason loves. I think it'd be a good idea to have the Gorilla Biscuits.
Well, and let me say this one more thing about before this turns into the Gorilla Biscuits podcast. they lyrically, while their music is very abrasive, it's very fast. It's also very positive. So lyrically,
Yeah.
like when I was a teenager and got into them,
Right.
so much of that genre of music is really sort of nihilistic and
Sure.
negative.
Right.
And,
Anarchy.
and these guys, all of the lyrics are about taking control of your own life and getting up and getting out and doing the
Yeah.
most you can to live a good life. I mean, the
Which
title of
clearly
their best
impacted
album-
you
Yeah,
to the
it did.
point of writing a book that is going to do exactly that for other
Yes,
people.
and I reference the Gorilla Biscuits in the book.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
That is awesome.
True story.
Jason, flying in here, making time, coming back to Austin, doing this podcast, amazing book, the symposium in February, your friendship, your mentorship in the dental sleep world has meant the world to me.
And thank you.
Can't thank you enough for making time to come see Ann and I. I really do appreciate it. Ann, you want any final words?
No, this has been awesome. And it definitely, I think, is filling a major gap in terms of exactly what your mission is, which is making sure that there's more opportunities for patients to be able to have access to more resources and bridging the gap. So I appreciate the work that you're doing.
And if you're listening to this podcast, you can catch us on YouTube. Each one of the links to not only Jason's personal social media, but also on a way to get to this book and to this conference. We will also reference some other things we talked about here. Terra Tacos would be one of those. So thank you for sleeping around with Dr. Anna Matthew. Appreciate
Thanks
it,
a
brother.
ton. I appreciate
Good
you.
man.
And thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.